I can't believe I am recording after almost 6 or 7 months. Hello everyone, my name is Eva. Welcome to my channel. I'm so happy to be back. At some point I'm going to make a video talking about this year because it's been insane for me. But I'm really happy because I made it to the end of the year and I managed to accomplish all my goals. So that feels really good. I feel like I've never been able to do that, but this time I was able to make it. So today I'm going to be talking about my top 10 favorite books of 2024. I think this year I managed to read 65 books. It was much less than I expected. I think I set my goal for 100. I usually manage to do that, but I also expect to read less than that. The reason why I read less than I expected was because there are like 10 books from those 65 that I reread, some of them even 3 times, I think. That's why I kind of fell behind my reading list, but I'm not upset about it. I mean, 65 is still pretty good. I wanted to check my reading challenge and confirm with Goodreads, but I forgot my password, so I cannot get in right now. So without further ado, let's begin. So in the place number 10, I put The Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires by Grady Hendrix. The reason why I put this in the place number 10 is because, okay, so what I like the most about reading is the literariness of a book, like the metaphors, the themes. I like books that are really heavy on the literary part, like the literariness. And I kind of feel that books nowadays lack that part because they focus so much on the plot. That's why I read a lot of classics, but not many contemporary books, not many contemporary novels. I know I sound like a snob, but I still enjoy reading some contemporary authors like Grady Hendrix. I think his books are a lot of fun to read. During my session, whenever I'm really stressed and I'm reading all these books that are really heavy on the literariness, I love reading books like this. To me, it's like watching a movie and kind of disconnecting myself from the work that I need to do. In the case of this book, I really love the fact that it's the perfect example of a Southern Gothic novel. It has everything you would expect from a Southern Gothic story. I'm planning to make a video talking about it and using this book as an example because I think it is perfect. It follows all the conventions of the Southern Gothic. This story is about a group of housewives who have a book club. The book club is also about like mystery novels and horror novels, and all of a sudden there is this strange guy who comes into their community and they start suspecting that he's a vampire and they need to fight him. In this story, the theme of intersectionality is very important, like how gender affects your place in your community, but also how race affects your involvement in the community. So that's something that I really liked, and it's something that you'll see a lot in Southern Gothic stories. Another thing that I loved about this book is that it feels like Stranger Things. Imagine if the housewives from Stranger Things had their own cool book club and they are also trying to save their community from the monsters. There's something about Grady Hendrix novels that have that nostalgic feeling. So if you're looking for something similar to Stranger Things, definitely read this. It's amazing. Also, look at this description. I was hooked after I read this. It's in the author's note. He says, "When I was a kid, I didn't take my mom seriously. She was a housewife who was in a book club, and she and her friends were always running errands and driving carpool and forcing us to follow rules that didn't make sense. They just seemed like a bunch of lightweights. Today I realized how many things they were dealing with that I was totally unaware of. They took the hits so we could skate by, obviously, because that's the deal. As a parent, you endure pain so your children don't have to. This is also a book about vampires. They are that iconic American archetype of the rambling man, wearing denim, wandering from town to town with no past and no ties. Think Jack Kerouac, think Shane, think Woody Guthrie, think Ted Bundy." With this book, I wanted to pit a man freed from all responsibilities but his appetites against women whose lives are shaped by their endless responsibilities. I wanted to pit Dracula against my mom. I think this is one of the best premises I have read. And the idea of creating a vampire inspired in Jack Kerouac, I think that's amazing. It's a really cool idea. In the place number 9, I put The White Tiger by Aravind Adiga. I was asked to read this book for one of my courses, so that's how I discovered this. But it's a jewel. The story is about the problems of poverty and corruption in India and how corporations and globalization play a role in the country's problems, and especially how the Indian elite is complicit in the misery of the lower classes. Our protagonist is Balran, who used to be a servant, but now he's telling us his villain origin story. I cannot say much because I'm gonna spoil it, but this novel for me is the perfect combination of literariness and entertainment. It has everything. It has a lot of imagery, lots of metaphors, but also it is a page turner. Like, you can't stop reading once you start. There is a movie on Netflix which I haven't watched because I thought this was so good that I didn't want to replace my perception of the novel with my perception of the movie. But if you are curious to see what the story is about, definitely check it out. I definitely recommend the book. This was so good. I told everyone in my family, you have to read this novel. I never do that, but this is a novel that I feel everyone could like. In the place number 8, I put The Autobiography of Malcolm X as told to Alex Haley. This was sad, infuriating, interesting, and tragic. This doesn't feel like a biography because it's not like full of facts. It reads like a story, but you still get the facts, the events. So if you guys don't know, Alex Haley, he is a fiction writer. He wrote Roots. I think it is his most famous work. I haven't read it, but I know it is extraordinary. And there was a TV show, a TV series. I think it's quite old, but it was super popular back in the days. I love how he treated Malcolm's life story, how transparent he was. Apparently Malcolm didn't want to talk about himself. He wanted to talk about his religion and his ideas. It was really hard for Alex Haley to get Malcolm to eventually talk about his life. So he ended up putting this autobiography together, and he had to obviously omit a lot of parts, a lot of information about Malcolm's religion and all these tangents he will go during their conversations. I feel like Malcolm's story in itself, it's so inspiring. He goes from being the best of his class to becoming a hustler, then to being imprisoned and to reforming himself and becoming the activist that everyone knows. I admired his willingness to educate himself and to grow as a person and to become better. He was an intellectual who was very often invited to all these Ivy League universities to debate with other students, and he didn't have a university education. So he was super intelligent, and he did that all by himself. During the last years of his life, he realized that he was wrong about many things, two of them being white people and Islam. And when he realized he was wrong, he came out and apologized and said that he had been wrong, that he had made a mistake, and he had promoted certain ideas. I guess you can call this reverse racism, but he apologized for this, and some people criticized him. They were like, that's not genuine and blah blah blah. But I find that very brave, especially because we live in times when all these public figures, whenever they make a mistake, they double down. It's really rare to find someone who genuinely apologizes for something. And I think Malcolm, it wasn't merely an apology. He actually was trying to change the way he was acting. He was actually trying to fix his mistakes. I think he was a brilliant man, and it's so sad the way his life ended. If ever you want to read a biography, this is the one. It's really good. It's not that long as well. I mean, it's a tiny book and it's 466 pages. So please check it out if you're interested in biographies. So number 7 is Light in August by William Faulkner. I don't have the book here because I borrowed this from one of my professors, but this is basically a Southern Gothic story. Again, this year I didn't read a lot of Gothic novels, but I did read a lot of Southern Gothic novels. So this story is about Joe Christmas. He is an orphan who grows up thinking he's biracial. He feels alienated because he is not sure of his identity and eventually becomes a bad person. He is also a racist, so his idea of what it means to be a black man is based on stereotypes. These ideas ironically turn into a self-fulfilling prophecy. I'm gonna leave that there because I don't want to spoil the book, but it's very, very haunting and very Southern Gothic as well. Now I have to say that from all of the novels I have read from William Faulkner, this is the third one, and I think this might be the one that I like the most. I guess Absalom is extraordinary, but the narration is so modernist that it kind of messes with the reading experience, although it's at the same time is part of it. So I guess if you want to get into Faulkner without going through Absalom and The Sound and the Fury that are very hard to read, I will definitely advise you to start with Light in August because the story is really good, but the narration style is quite standard. It's a good entry into William Faulkner's novels. In the place number 6, I put The Burning the Tulsa Race Massacre of 1921 by Tim Madigan. So Tim Madigan is a journalist and he decided to write this history book, about the Tulsa Race Massacre. So I'm gonna read you what it says in the back cover to give you an idea of what this is about. On the morning of June the 1st, 1921, a white mob numbering in the thousands marched across the railroad tracks, dividing black from white in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and obliterated a black community then celebrated as one of America's most prosperous. 34 square blocks of Tulsa's Greenwood community, known then as the Negro Wall Street of America, were reduced to smoldering rubble. So in this book, Tim Madigan collects a lot of testimonies from different witnesses who used to live in Greenwood, and they tell their version of the story and what happened that day. Some of the anecdotes he's using come from recordings, so people who now have passed, he is using those recordings as evidence of what happened. The reason why I put this in the list was that I think it's really well written. The whole story is terrifying, and I also think it's something that has been concealed for a long time. One of the witnesses is a primary school teacher, and she was saying how none of the children in the school where she teaches know about what happened in their community. This has been so concealed, so erased from history, that I feel like this is an important work of history and journalism. Some parts were really, really hard to read. There are horrible things that some of the people see, how some of their neighbors die, how some of the white people dispose of the African American bodies. So if you see me struggling to talk about this book, there's a reason why. Now you know it. Again, I think this is a really, really important work of history and journalism. I absolutely recommend this. It's not boring to read. He narrates the events as if it was a story or like different mini stories. Many of the people he's following during the day and night that the massacre occurred are from different backgrounds. Of course, I think 90% of them are African Americans, because they were the ones who were victimized. But it's very interesting to see the different backgrounds, like some of them were veterans from the war, others were like ordinary people, civilians, others used to work at white people's houses. So I kind of feel that having all these mini narrations from different African Americans' perspective helps to flesh out that story, what happened that day. In the place number 5, I put Lolita by Vladimir Nabokov. If you guys watch my video on this novel, you know that I absolutely love it. This novel was so misinterpreted for such a long time by stupid critics and scholars that I feel like we need to reclaim what the story is really about. I'm gonna say something a little bit controversial, but whatever. I kind of feel that this story precedes the Me Too movement, or at least foreshadows the Me Too movement. If you guys remember well, the Me Too movement started when all these women from Hollywood and the entertainment industry in general started to speak out against sexual. And I think the purpose of this novel is to criticize the idea that it is okay to abuse and exploit women in the name of art. So yeah, that's what I think this story is super important. It's important to have these conversations about what happens in this story. I think I said this in my video or perhaps in the comments, but I'm going to repeat it here. One of the things that I love the most about this novel is the style in which it is written. When you compare the style, which is very aesthetic, very beautiful, to what is happening in the story, the contrast is shocking, is horrifying. I feel like I needed to put this here because definitely it's one of those stories that you feel like once you finish you want to reread it. I know it's not for everyone, so it's okay if you don't like it or if you feel triggered by the themes in this story, feel free to pass. In place number 4, I put The Color Purple by Alice Walker. This is one of the most beautiful stories I have read. It is about the intersectional experiences of African American women, like how they deal with gender violence, but also with racial violence. The story is about two sisters who are separated under terrible circumstances, and they start to live very different lives. We mostly follow Sally, but as the story progresses, we get to know more about Nettie, who is the other sister. What I like the most about this story is the theme of sisterhood and how all these women in the book manage to create friendships and to uplift each other. Many of them live horrible lives, and they still manage to help each other and to build this community of support between women. I think I have never seen that in a book, that portrayal of female friendship in a way that it's not about the silly moments here. It's about helping each other to be there, like offer emotional support. I think the female characters in this book are amazing because they have very different personalities, and you can see them, like they are so well written that you can see each one of them and how different they are from each other. I also don't want to share a lot about this element in the story, but there are some sapphic elements, and it's really wonderful how Alice Walker portrays it. I'm not gonna lie, this story has really heavy themes. Definitely check the trigger warnings before you get into this. I wanted to read this for a long time, and last year I think it was, I decided to watch the movie. It's from the 1980s, I think. It's really well done. If you feel like watching a good movie, that movie is good, but I feel like the book is way better. The movie is pretty faithful to the story. It's just like some things are changed for the purpose of adaptation, and also I didn't like that the sapphic elements were almost completely erased in the movie. If you're okay with heavy themes, definitely read this. It's also a quick reading. There are not so many pages. It's 289. Another reason why I like this so much is that it is a story that reminds you that no matter how bad things are, there's always some good in the world. And I kind of feel that message, that overall message in this novel is really uplifting. The story is not just uplifting in terms of the relationships of the characters, but it's also uplifting for the reader. Like this idea that no matter what, there is beauty and goodness in this world. In the third place, I put Corregidora by Gail Jones. So this story sings to your soul. There's no other way I can describe it. The story is about Ursa, who is a blues singer, and he is a victim of domestic violence. Something happens in the beginning of the story and she cannot have children. The problem is that she was raised with the belief that she must bear witness to the history of slavery, the stories of her great-grandmother, her grandmother, and her mother. So she must find a way to bear witness to the horrors of slavery without having children. This is a story that intertwines the personal with the historical. The story shows how domestic violence in African American homes is very often the result of slavery and segregation dynamics. The male characters in this story are often aggressive toward their partners because they feel emasculated by society, and they believe that by being controlling with their partners, they can reclaim their masculinity. So once again, we have a story that explores the themes of intersectionality and the experiences of Black women in a racist but also a sexist society and culture. I think this was written in the 1970s, so I guess that some things are outdated. I still feel that it is a relevant story and it is an important work of literature. I don't think this book is for everyone because it is very lyrical. It uses the blues form to convey the thoughts of the main character. I also think that it is very explicit. Some scenes are very sexual and others it uses a lot of bad words. So I understand that not everyone likes that. I still think it is a relevant story, and especially it is a story that I find interesting to study in the context of the 1970s and what was happening back in the days. I'm not gonna say I recommend this to you because, again, I know it is not for everyone. In place number 2, I put Native Guard by Natasha Threataway. This is a book of poetry, and I have to say that is one of the most extraordinary books of poetry I have read, especially written by a contemporary author. Natasha Threataway is another African-American author, and this book shares similar themes with some of the other books I have talked about in this video. Again, we have the intersections and connections between the personal experience and the historical experience. This book is divided in 3 parts. The poems in the first part are about the life and death of Natasha Threataway's mother. The second part is about the Louisiana Native Guards. I don't have my phone here to check it out, but I think they were a cavalry unit for the Union Army, and she's basically showing how their history, their story has been erased. The third part focuses on Threataway's experience as a biracial woman in the South and as a biracial artist, and how her Southern experience differs from other Southerners. Threataway links her mother's death with the death and the historical losses of African American men and women, but especially with the story of the Native Guards. And to her, tending to her mother's grave and tending to the metaphorical grave of the Native Guard is a way of tending to history and a way of reacting to how history has been erased. In many of these poems, she exposes the ways in which museums, memorials, and monuments have contributed to the erasure of African American history and to favor a very convenient narrative of the South. If you guys have heard about the lost cause, that's basically what she's criticizing here. Since Threataway is biracial, the third part is very interesting because she uses miscegenation as a metaphor for American history and how American history is not black and white. What she means is that the history of white Americans is intertwined with the history of African Americans, and you cannot tell one of the stories without the other. And finally, in the first place, I put Beloved by Toni Morrison. This is a book that is going to haunt you in your sleep. And again, you can call this Gothic, you can call this Southern Gothic, you can also call this a neo-slave narrative because it has some elements. It's incredibly unsettling, this story. The story is basically about an African American family who runs away from slavery, and trauma comes back to haunt you in the shape of a person who is beloved. I cannot say much more than that because I'm going to spoil it for you, but just know that this book is incredible. The narration reminded me a little bit of Absalom in the sense that it's very fragmented, but I find that very compelling. Like, I love when authors play with the narration style. So for me, this was incredible. If you like vampires, you have to read this book. It also subverts many of the tropes related to vampires, especially the fact that the vampire is a creation of the Western European person portraying usually the other or someone who is not white European. Very, very interesting as a concept. Toni Morrison, apparently she does very well magical realism. I have only read Beloved and I have read many of her essays, which I love. I just bought Sola, so I'm gonna read that one, and I'm planning to read more of her books. But this was incredible. It's again one of those books that once you finish, you want to start again. That concept of community mothering and sisterhood is again present in this story. It's not as prominent as in The Color Purple. This is a very different story, but the idea is there. The idea that through the community one can heal trauma, not completely heal trauma, but at least it's a start. So yeah, I highly recommend this book. You have seen that I have read extraordinary books this year, but this one was just incredible. I know African American literature was very prominent in this top 10. The thing is that I've been reading a lot of African American literature because I am thinking about doing my master's degree on African American literature. At the same time, I have read other stuff, and I just think that the way that African Americans write stories is incredible. So that's the reason why most of the books featured in this top 10 are from African American authors. Here's a very personal opinion. I think these three novels are the holy trinity of African American women's literature. I think they convey very important aspects of Black women's experiences. I feel like if you want to get into African American literature, and especially written by female authors, check one of these books. You're not going to regret it. So that was it for today. I hope you have enjoyed this top 10 video. Please let me know in the comments if you have read any of these novels and what are your thoughts. Thank you so much for watching, for subscribing, and for supporting my channel. It means a lot to me. I wish you all a happy new year. Take care. Bye.